It's a high-level overview of tenant management and just hitting some key points to having a relationship with a tenant. I believe that there's a 50-50 balance here, and you need to really meet in the middle when it comes to fostering a good, healthy relationship with a tenant. I can't tell you how often I've seen these relationships grow off balance, and it ends up being very unenjoyable for the property owner, the landlord in this case. Boundaries are the number one most important thing. And I know you're probably watching this or listening to this thinking to yourself, yeah, obviously, you'd be amazed. This is a slippery slope, and you'd be amazed how quickly this thing gets out of whack because as time goes on, as you get more comfortable working together, all of a sudden these boundaries begin to blur. And then from the tenant's perspective, these things become expectations and you become sort of beholden to them in this relationship, which is really unfair to you. And frankly, it's unfair to them as well because they'll only be disappointed if they push too far and then if you push back. And that can be really damaging to the relationship. So boundaries are very important. What types of boundaries are we talking about here? I do not do the after hours stuff unless it's an emergency. So you have to put your foot down. I know it's tempting if your tenant reaches out to you with like a low level, sort of not very much non-critical question or comment or observation after hours. Maybe you're sitting on the couch, you're at the table and you think, oh, it's no problem. I'll just respond to this. Don't. Keep it business hours. That nonverbal sort of, actions speak louder than words. Response to them will show them that, no, my landlord is available during business hours. Don't respond on the weekend unless it's an emergency. You get back to them on Monday. And if they say, hey, why didn't you get back to me? You can just explain to them, well, it was the weekend. It was after hours. I was spending time with my family. That's perfectly fine. That shouldn't be perceived as rude. If it is, hey, you've done your part. You've been polite and professional, and it's not on you. That's a them thing. So that's part of the boundaries, really important. I try to avoid the text messaging thing. Try to stick with the emails. Get it documented, get it in email, get it in writing. I try to avoid the texts. I try to avoid the phone calls. Obviously have a phone call, when you need it, but I love to have everything in email. I find it to be a much more professional and easily referred to form of communication between you and your tenant, and be mindful of the times, right? The business hours. You have to be mindful of not becoming sort of ending up being like at the mercy of your tenant when it comes to the communication piece. But if you set up those boundaries and you push back on things as far as priority goes, I think you'll be in really good shape. For example, a tenant is going to perceive many things as a high priority issue, right? Oh, I've got, I've got an issue. I've got a light that's out, or it's just a bulb or something like that, or it's just I've got a very low priority issue, right? I've got an issue in the yard or something like that. It's important to kind of just let them know, communicate with them what the priority of that issue is and that when and how it will be addressed. I've visited properties before and had a tenant catch my ear and I'm just very open and honest with them and communicate, I understand I'll get this documented for you. But this is not something that's going to be handled immediately, with a high sense of urgency on it, and if they push back, then you just remind them about, your priorities of issues and examples of what constitutes an urgent and high priority issue versus medium and low. And, the communication piece really fills in here to make sure that they're on the same page with you so that their expectations are set. They're going to be disappointed. Tenants will always want every issue or every request, remedied and done so very quickly, right? And if they had their way, they'd have, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. They'd have all the best of everything, right? But there's a balance that has to be struck there. And I think if you establish your boundaries on the front end, it's going to benefit you and ultimately benefit your relationship with your tenant and encourage them to stay for a long time. Now, on the other side of the coin, you need to do your job. You need to be proud of the property you own. You need to maintain it. You need to not cut corners and not try to save money in every single place, all right? Sometimes it's more worthwhile and better benefit to everyone to just replace the appliance instead of trying to fix it. It's just the best thing to do, ultimately in the long run. Sometimes a little gesture like replacing something for a tenant goes a long way, as long as it's clearly communicated, like, look, I want to do this because you've been great. I want to do this. So communicate, right on the front end there to them that, like, you're essentially, you don't have to do this thing for them, but you're doing it for them. And for most people, that's going to translate to, yeah, my landlord kind of went out of their way and did a great thing for me. It's going to encourage them to stick around, to stay there, to re-sign their lease and become good long-term tenants. These relationships are built on trust, right? So on the one side of the coin, you need to be respected. Your time needs to be respected and your boundaries need to be respected. The other side of the coin, you need to take good care of the property, their home that they live in. And if you achieve both of these things, you're going to stand a really good chance at having a great long-term tenant.